Marohi, 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 Marohi. How do I pronounce Marohi, Erqi, maybe Erqi? Let's check the archive. Could be Erqi if you speak Chinese, or Archie from Beijing. I can read you in my mind, but out loud I just can't decide. Forget it, I'll just have to try. The sound that comes to me on the fly. Welcome to the build for Marohi, Erqi, sky. Damn. Hello, welcome to the Panda Academy, and this is the build guide for my solo self-found Inquisitor using Purifying Flame. Now, this build is not perfect, I'm not perfect, and it's on solo self-found, so I'm sure you can find ways to improve it and make this build even better, or you could copy it exactly as it is, as it has now taken down many bosses. So let's talk about the main mechanics, and a lot of my thought process isn't into this build, because there is quite a lot. But first, Battle Mage makes use of our wonderful Marohi Erqi, which has really high base damage, so we add that base damage to our spells using Battle Mage. Now, we use Purifying Flame because the effectiveness of added damage is 300%. There are other spells you could use, but I decided to go with this. I like it quite a lot. On top of that, we are using Pious Path and Sanctuary to give us really, really crazy regen for defensive purposes, and we grab this for both offense and defense. For Keystones, we're using Avatar of Fire, so we are doing loads of fire damage and only fire damage. And Elemental Overload, it's really hard to get a lot of crit because we're using a Maul, so we can get just enough crit to get a lot of use out of Elemental Overload, but you do not have to. You could take these 3 points back, these 4 points back, and build into Heart of Flame instead, and you won't lose too much damage, and it might feel a little more consistent for you if you cannot find enough crit chance. So the first thing I want to talk about is my gem setup and the different gems that I'm using. So I'm using Purifying Flame. It is my 6th link with Spell Echo, Concentrated Effect, Inspiration Support, and added fire damage and fire penetration support. This is our main skill, and you can see the AoE is not too affected by the concentrated effect. Our clear is still fantastic with it. For our auras, we're running Clarity, Vitality, Herald of Ash, Herald of Purity, and Determination. We also have Precision going on. Now, our Precision and Clarity are both really low level, but they give us just enough bonus to make it worth running if you have the extra spots, but you don't need it. The most important ones are Vitality, Herald of Ash, Purity, and Determination. On top of that, we are running Convocation. What? Why are you running Convocation? Well, we are running Spiritual Aid, so increases and reductions to minion damage also affect us. So we have a bunch of minion nodes, and we've taken Enduring Bond. If you've used a minion skill recently, minions and us gain 30% increased damage. So you can see we're at 486k damage, tooltip, and then you pop Convocation, and it jumps up by, 20k or so. It's a nice little buff for the golems, but we're actually buffing our own damage with it. On our left click is Molten Shell, and of course we have Val Molten Shell if we're ever in a serious pickle. We use Wave of Conviction as well. This could be your main skill, by the way. Wave of Conviction does a bunch of damage as well, but we're only using it to apply Flammability with our Hex Touch support. So it applies our Flammability, but we also use Combustion. So if we hit and it ignites, they get an additional -10 to fire resistance on that. So it's just to spread our curses. So usually our gameplay is that we'll spread our curse and then start shooting afterwards for anything that's really big. Of course, most things will just die to our Purifying Flame. And the last thing is just our Flame Dash to move around. Nothing else is too crazy in this build. For defenses, though, we are immune to Corrupting Blood. We have taken that here. I personally hate Corrupting Blood. I can't stand it. But if you're okay with it, you could probably get it on a Life Flask, and that's fine. We have taken all of these nodes and this node to get our resistances up to 80 and 79 and 79. Our resistances are very high. Look at our life regeneration. 1,500 life regen, 1,500 energy shield regen. This basically makes it so our energy shield is always full and will always take -200 damage on whatever hit is incoming. Many hits do not even break our shield, or we don't even notice it come in. We also have -60% to crit damage by taking this Armor Mastery and taking this node here. That is the majority of our defenses from that. On top of our physical damage reduction being very high, we would just pop one of our flasks, and bam, we're at maximum physical damage reduction. From our Pantheons, we're taking Cannot Be Frozen on here, and the reduction on the stuns is super important. If you get stunned, you die. That's just like, it's one of the most dangerous things in the game, so make sure you're not getting stunned. And this is the one that I usually like to run, but of course you would change the bottom one. Depending on what map you're running, you should be changing your Pantheons. Okay, let's talk about our items now. So of course, this is the bread and butter of our damage in the build, Marohi Erqi. Everything else is just there's options. You don't have to get locked into any of these items. These are just some of my recommendations, but there's lots of different options. Our helmet, we're running Vol's Vision. Now, this is not an expensive helmet, but it gives us 400 life per second if no equipped items are corrupted. None of my items are corrupted, so we're getting loads of life regen and energy shield regen because of Inquisitor. We also get the increased maximum life, but, you know, that's just a bonus. But we're using this defensively. There are many other options. Some other options that I might recommend. There is Crown of the Inward Eye. This is probably good on almost every single build. This is just really strong. Bone helmets. For the minions deal increased damage, we would also get that bonus. So you could totally use a bone helmet and craft whatever resists or life you needed on it. This one is interesting, and I don't know how I feel about it. I just found it recently, so I've actually been questioning should I try it. But it gives us evasion rating, which we don't care about. So maybe it's bad, maybe it's good. I actually kind of want to try it, but I haven't gotten around to it yet. For our amulet, we're using Yoke of Suffering, and this allows our big fire hits to shock. So that is the biggest part of this. Our big fire hits, even on really big bosses, you know, Cyrus, Eater of Worlds, they're getting 20% shocks on them. Now, of course, that's not like the highest shock possible, but that's still pretty significant increase to our damage. So this is why I've chosen this, but you don't need to. There are other options, including rare amulets that give plus to your spells, which would also give us loads of damage. Do note that my anointment here is Discord Artisan. I will show you where that is. Increased damage for each Herald buff affecting us, and increased effect of Herald buffs on you. Well, we're using 2, but the increased amount that they buff us is really the important part, because that means we get even more physical damage as extra fire. We get even more physical damage in general. So this is actually a very powerful node, and I highly recommend you anoint it. For our body armor, it's not 6-linked because our weapon is. But if you're on trade and you see that, you know, a 6-link unique item is very expensive, I highly recommend you buy a 6-link chest. That is whatever base you like, white, blue, or yellow, non-corrupted. Any stats, doesn't matter. And you buy that, and then you craft on it yourself. That is my highest recommendation. Is the cheapest way to do this, is that your weapon does not have to be 6-linked. Just your armor. You can have the 6-link in your armor. You only need one 6-link setup here. But in my case, I did not need to 6-link my armor because I 6-linked my weapon. So I can wear any armor that I want. So I have a rare armor. It gives me a little bit of fire damage, but it's mostly just defensive. You know, 2,000 armor, 113 life. That's all that matters here. In our rings, Opal and Vermilion, now these are just like 2 of the best rings. This is your offensive option. This is your defensive option. You don't need to use them if you need more resistances. That's fine. The way to craft this yourself, you just get the base, and then you're crafting Anger. Essence of Anger to get increased fire damage. You'll just do it until you get some mods that are good enough. Of course, this is not even a perfect ring. It's far from perfect, but it gives me chaos resist, so I was like pretty happy with that. In this case, I used a very special essence, and that gives me gain 10% of physical damage as extra fire. It's one of the very special ones. I think it's Hysteria, but I might be wrong. You should double check. But one of the essences will give you 10% of physical damage as extra fire. You just want that, and you'll just keep pressing it on until you get some mods that you're happy with. That's how you craft these rings. I'm on solo self-found, so I can't buy any of this stuff. I have to make it all myself. For a belt, Stitch and Vise, probably always the best option. We don't need stats from strength. I mean, you could go with a life belt, but usually we'll go for the ability to have a jewel. This is the jewel I'm using. Cast speed is probably the highest damage increase you can get in your Abyss Jewel, because this build really lacks cast speed. So getting cast speed there is pretty important. If you can get life on it, that's even better. I just have some extra damage, of course, but life with cast speed would probably be better than this. For my gloves, you're going to craft your gloves using Essences of Fear. This gives you minion damage on your gloves. Of course, you're going to search for the implicit minion damage as well with Searing Exarch, but you want to craft your gloves using Essences of Fear to get minion damage on your gloves. That's all. It gives you increased damage. It's very good. For my boots, I have Cannot Be Chilled with my movement speed, and increased damage with non-Val skills during soul gain prevention. This is just because Val Molten Shell has a 16.8 second soul gain prevention time. That's really long. So we can really take advantage of that when we pop Val Molten Shell defensively, and then all of a sudden we get a 53% increased damage. That's pretty good. The Cannot Be Chilled is a little bit hard to craft, but the way that I did it was using Veiled Chaos until I hit it. As far as the implicits go, I mean, the increased movement speed's nice. I just go with whatever I have. But in general, most of this stuff is just rare. I'm just trying to give you an idea of how you can try and get these items yourself. If you're on solo self-found, you do not have to buy all these items. You could probably make the majority of them yourself. As far as flasks go, I recently saw Bottled Faith. I found it. It dropped. I was very happy. It's very expensive. You don't need this by any means. An alternative would maybe be Cinder Swallow, which is much cheaper. Or not at all. You might not need any of them. Just an Onslaught Flask for damage, Sulfur Flask for damage. Like, you've got lots of options, but you do not need anything in your flasks. Really, defensive setups, we just want armor. So that's pretty much this entire build. Yes, you have all the time you need to gather your will, sir. That's pretty much it for the build. If you have any questions about this build, about, I don't know, about how to craft some of your gear, you can just come to my Twitch channel, and I'm happy to answer any of your questions. I love teaching this game to people and explaining my ideas. I've got some other great ideas for builds that I hope that I can finish and make bear fruit. But in any case, that's the end of this video, and yeah, make sure to come check my Twitch out at twitch.tv/pandacademy. See y'all later.